So good morning. It's nice to be with you here. I want to begin by thanking our wonderful hosts for their hospitality and in providing us with this beautiful space and this enchanting location to practice together. Together, physically, together. How about that? Who would have thought what a big deal that is? We really did. I don't know about you, but I certainly took it for granted. It was just my assumption it would never be disrupted. And what a disruption it was. And still, let's not forget, for those of us who are fortunate, it's sort of over, but there are many who are not fortunate, by choice or by design, by fate, whatever it is. So we sit with them today. We sit with everyone. They're all here, including our virtual Sangha, and thank you for logging in, I suppose is the word. So my name's Bokushu, and I am, for those of you who don't know me, one of these annoying people who always wants to do the right thing. And this extends to many aspects of my daily life, including diet. And you wouldn't know it to look at me, because I am super skinny, but I do worry about my diet. And so for years, I wouldn't eat ice cream. It's unhealthy, all that. And recently I was just like, what the hell, we just survived this cataclysm. Let's do a little ice cream. And I have a particular brand that I like. So I went and bought that brand, and I noticed, maybe it was the second container I bought, that since I had stopped eating it, recently at some point they added a little slogan to the lid of their ice cream. And the slogan said, "More unites us than divides us." And my first thought was, well, when we need messages like that on ice cream containers, we know we're really in trouble. I mean, this is, wow. And of course, on the other hand, this brand hopes that what unites us is buying their ice cream, and lots of it. So, there's that side of it too. I mean, it's a helpful message, they think, and perhaps also a commercially helpful message as well. It is well-intentioned, but from the Zen standpoint, when we see division, that's when division arises. So we create it. That's what humans do. We're very busy creating division. Because originally, and right now, there is no such thing. All of us are breathing this air, sitting in this beautiful space, the greenery right there. And even if we weren't in this particular place, where is the boundary that separates any of us from one another? Where exactly is the line that separates Hyannis from Hyannis Port, which I'm told is the tonier place in this location? And where is the line that separates Hyannis Port from all the other towns that are here and far away, as we think of it commonly? But we do, as a species, like to create these divisions. And so Zen practice has come along and been cultivated for many centuries to help us with our problem, our self-created delusion that we are separate. And so it has come to the point where we have been so eager and zealous in creating division that now ice cream companies must remind us that more unites us than divides us. So what is this more? Is there such a thing as more? And what is the more that unites us more than it divides us? The more, of course, is that we like division. We are united in our love of division. So, if they really want to get down to it, they're just contributing to the problem with this well-intentioned slogan, reminding us that the more that unites us is that we like to be divided. And we work very hard at that. There's a whole industry. And speaking of profit, of course, it's very profitable for the political parties and the media to have all this contention so that they can sell whatever it is that they're after selling. So we are reminded of what we already do far too much of. And how do we separate uniting from dividing? That's an interesting conundrum, where we think that pushing away is dividing and pulling close is uniting. How can you pull close what's already immediately adjacent? Right there, so close you can't even see the gap. You can't see the seed. You only see it when you want to see it. And there are a lot of people who do want to see it, and I include myself. I'm not immune from this tendency. I'm right there in the trenches with my opinions about what should be and what should not be, and how it should be, and for how long, for whom, and so on. Infinite numbers of ways of slicing and dicing this one reality, this undivided, seamless reality. And I suppose on some level I would like to think that I'm just a tiny step ahead of those who don't realize that there's this one seamless reality. And that too is an expression of the division that we love to create. So we are stuck with our tendency, and the way to work with it is to see it. And that is what we do here. That is our joint project today, and off the cushion, is to see what we do, and just to watch it and to witness it. And when we do that, it changes. It depends on many factors as to what that change means for each of us, or what form the change takes. But it is a miraculous thing that when we actually see what we're up to, what our minds are up to, that transforms the whole picture. So this is the wondrous power of our practice, to transform our misshapen views of reality, our delusional views of this one world, one universe. Who knows where the world ends and the universe begins? I don't. So I could go on about all the things that we divide ourselves with. I mean, COVID would be a perfect example of how that's become a bone of contention, and how many very strong opinions there are about, is it a virus, is it transmitted this way or that way, what do masks do, what do vaccines do? It's just extraordinary. I won't take sides, a non-partisan talk, but I think we really need to look at how aggressive we are with that tendency, even when matters of life and death are involved. We can't seem to get it together and agree on anything. So, and I just want to point out, if you are more comfortable in a chair, or anyone, please do feel free to do what you need to do as I speak to be comfortable. physically. So don't stand on ceremony here. So we are responsible for creating these divisions. And another way of putting that is we are responsible for our own suffering. This is the creation of suffering, is to contend about everything, to be deeply attached to our views and to assert them militantly in the faces of others who disagree. And again, I'm not separate from this tendency. I see it in myself, and I work with it in myself. And I am responsible for my suffering, which unites me with you, and all of you with each other. So it's quite wonderful, this delight we take in suffering. What an opportunity. We would not need to practice, would we? We did not have this tendency. So we are indeed fortunate, but we're only fortunate insofar as we learn to use it, to work with it, to not be used by it, to not be worked over by the suffering we create. And this, of course, is nothing new. Our history is full of this, as you know. It goes back as far as humankind, and probably much farther. So who's to know when it began? But we do know that even in the Zen literature, this wanting to suffer is quite abundantly visible. And so I would like to illustrate it with a koan. And I don't know from your other experiences here whether you're fully aware of what a koan is. So very briefly, I guess in my words, it would be a Zen teaching story, a paradoxical expression that is meant to allow us to drop our separating way of thinking, our way of slicing and dicing, which is all about our cognition, our logic, our reasoning, which we value so highly. So there's this koan that's very famous called, actually I didn't write the title, so I don't know the exact title, but it's the Mumonkan Case 14, Nansen Kills a Cat. It's also in the Blue Record, divided there into two koans, 63 and 64. So the koan goes like this. Once the monks of the Eastern Hall and the Western Hall were disputing about a cat. Nansen, holding up the cat, said, "Monks, if you can say a word of Zen, I will spare the cat. If you cannot, I will kill it." No monk could answer. Nansen finally killed the cat. In the evening, when Joshu came back, Nansen told him of the incident. Joshu took off his sandal, put it on his head, and walked off. Nansen said, "If you had been there, I could have saved the cat." So, this story starts out with a situation where these monks were, as the translation says, disputing about a cat. Of course, there's a certain absurdity in that because, well, what is there to dispute? What is there really to dispute about a cat or anything? But of course, we're extremely ingenious. We're always trying to find a way to make it special, make it different. And so they figured that out. Who knows what it was? Does a cat have a soul? Does it not have a soul? Does it have Buddha nature? Does it not have Buddha nature? Does it walk on its hind legs? Ever? Blah, 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 blah. Something or other they came up with. And they were all very eagerly going back and forth about it. And the master of the place comes out and sees this and says, screw this, you guys are really on the wrong track. I'm going to fix your wagons. So he held it up, and he really made it very urgent. So what was he holding up? Well, of course he was holding up an animal, but he was showing them something else, something much closer to home. In this creature, right then and there was expressed all of the suffering of that group. The East Hall and the West Hall, who's right, who's wrong, all that stuff was right there embodied in that animal. And it's a matter of life and death. And aren't we seeing that right now with COVID? Just to go back to that for a moment. People are dying because of this disagreement. And that's the cat now. If you want a cat, there's a big one hanging right in front of everybody in this country and the world. It's not just in this country, these disagreements about how is it transmitted and do masks work and vaccines and blah, 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 everywhere, where they have the leisure to dispute such things, where they're not gasping for breath in a hospital corridor, they are disputing it. So that's our cat. If I could think of something right now, of course this is just my intellectual interpretation of the koan, which is what we do in Zen talks. We give you some sort of reasonable sounding explanation, but it's fortunately nothing to do with the koan. So I just have to throw that in. That's the fine print of the talk. Make sure you read the fine print. So he held up the cat and said he would kill it if you can say a word of Zen. And then it says, no monk could answer. So let's just chew on that for a second. No monk could answer. Now, of course, if you're like me, your mind immediately goes to this interpretation. There's this group. They're all being challenged to say a word of Zen, and none of them, so no monk, none of them could answer. Who is no monk? Is there such a person? I just leave it to you as a question. Was Nansen saying nobody could answer? Or was the author of the koan saying there was someone who could answer, had they been with it? With it! 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 Really with it. We can really be with it. It's a matter of life and death. At the ultimate moment, whether it's COVID or God knows what else, Lyme disease, you name it, will we be with it at long last? That's what we're here for, to be with it. So that in any moment, whatever the conditions, whatever the challenge, we can meet it with our hearts and minds fully engaged. Because otherwise we're missing our lives. And that is the greatest tragedy that could befall any of us, is to miss our lives. This life that we are creating right now. We are co-creating life. Codependent, arising right now, life that we create. Nansen was very committed, and he was among the greatest of the great. He was very committed to helping people see that, to see the stakes, just how high they are. says, and as one interpretation goes, no monk could answer. So then it says, Nansen finally killed the cat, finally. And again we can ask ourselves, and this is important if you work with koans, or just read them, every word counts. Every word. In the order that it's written in. I am extremely particular about this when people come to me with koans, because it is incredibly subtle. Nansen finally. When was that? Was that just some 1,000 years ago? Finally. We create finally. It is us. Finally, when we are with it, it is us. And we are creating that condition in ourselves. We're cultivating that in ourselves right here, in this place, together. So he killed the cat. And then, in the evening, presumably of the same day, this fellow Joshu came back. Jiaozhou or Joshu, Nansen or Nanshuan, student of Nanshuan, Joshu, an incredibly famous teacher in his own right. He came back, and Nansen told him of the incident. Joshu took off his sandal, put it on his head, and walked off. So there, Joshu is expressing his truth, his embodiment of what had happened. Joshu didn't say, well, you should never have done that, what a terrible thing you did. Or, gosh, I wish I'd been there, too bad you sent me off to do some, whatever it was he was doing. You know, there wasn't any of that. He didn't propose to have a funeral for the animal. He just took off his sandal, put it on his head, and walked off. So, I guess what comes up for me is why sandal? Why not sandals? So again, I think we really owe it to ourselves, if we work with these, to be extremely meticulous about what is actually written there. His sandal. Now, if you know the story of Bodhidharma, the founder of our lineage before Japan, where Dogen founded it, there's a mythological tale. You can correct me if I've got this wrong. That they opened his tomb and that they just found one sandal. Isn't that the story? Mm-hmm. One. Why only one sandal in that tomb? Where is the tomb? Are we separate from it? And what happens when we open it? What do we find? And there's a great quote from somebody very quotable, Oscar Wilde, that goes, if I'm paraphrasing it, I'm sorry. Terrible as the ruins of cities are to behold, the ruins of men are still more terrible. This was after he was released from his confinement. His confinement. Hard labor. Not just darting in and out of drugstores like I did. Terrible, the ruins of men. Somehow that sound pulls us right back. Each of us has a distinct impression of what that sound means. And if we drop the meaning and just hear the sound, we have our lives without even naming it. We just hear. We just connect. So, in this other translation, or in Bokushu record, it, instead of saying Nansen killed the cat, it said Nanchuan cut the cat in 2 pieces. That's quite a different thing, isn't it? You can kill a cat without cutting it in 2 pieces. Cutting it in 2 pieces is rather extreme, if you ask me. It's kind of overdoing it. But the Bokushu record is more of a Rinzai text, so they like to be quite thorough. Very. So, cut it in 2 pieces, and isn't that what we're doing all the time? More unites us than divides us. Engrave it on a pillow, and then burn the fucking pillow. That'll do you more good. Burning the pillow. There's one out there, just waiting to be embroidered and then burned. So, the stakes are very high. What we do here could not be more important. Never underestimate what this practice does both inside and outside. Cats are being held up all the time, and we can illuminate them and be them. As we suffer, we can be them. We can witness our own suffering. We are not here to exile or suppress our suffering. We are not here to castigate or blame ourselves for our suffering. We are here simply to see it, to allow it to express itself fully in us. And then we have a choice about how we express it in the world. So the difference between inward expression and inward witnessing of suffering and how it is expressed to others, to the world, is a world of difference. And that is the difference that we are cultivating here. That is the uniting. If you want to be whole, not a cat cut in 2, live with the pieces. Live with the brokenness. Live with the pain. And watch it. Just keep watching it. I'd like to close my talk with a poem that I saw on the wall of one of your beautiful museums in Boston, the Museum of Fine Arts. Had on its wall, somewhere in that vast space of interconnected rooms, each separate and yet integral to the others, flowing together in one whole. A poem by the famous Chinese poet Du Fu called Traveling Again, written, they say, in 761. The field is sleek and vivid. Thin mist shines. On soft sand, the sunlight's color shows it's late. All the traveler's sorrow fades away. What better place to rest than this? Thank you.